Welcome back to the show. As I said just before the break, we can all use some humor right now. And the good news is not only are we going to have humor live streaming, but we can actually go and see some comedy in person. Isn't that wonderful to hear? I am joined by storyteller Drew Hayden Taylor. Drew, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. And you've got your whitewater rafting down the river of Indigenous humor coming up at the Shankman Center. But before we get to that, Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in comedy.
Well, I've only actually been a stand-up comedian once, and I got to do that at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And once you've done that, the idea of doing the yuck yucks and flin flon sort of disappears. But more than anything, I'm a humorist. I'm a
Right.
humorist. I write humor. I write about comedy. I don't really get up and do it a lot. Plus the fact I'm a storyteller. I'm talking now from the First Nation, was born, raised, and live. And so a lot of my humor comes from my upbringing, the storytelling I heard, and the funny stories I heard. So a lot of that comes into the work I do, the writing I do, and I've written about humor. I've written
Right.
humor. I've done documentaries on humor. So I like to think I practice it, but I explore it and celebrate it.
Well, let's talk about the importance of it, and especially when it comes to Indigenous culture. And I think it's a great way for people to learn about Indigenous culture and be entertained and have some fun at the same time. Drew.
Oh, definitely. I've been very fortunate to have traveled to over 150 First Nation communities in Canada and the United States.
Wow.
And everywhere I've been, with a laugh, a smile, and a joke. And I mean, that's one of the great things about the Indigenous community, the power, the presence, and just the sheer quality of Indigenous humor. And the thing is, eh, it's my opinion, for whatever that's worth, that it's been our sense of humor that's allowed us to survive 400 years of colonization. I remember talking to an
Right.
elder on the Blood Reserve who told me that, in his opinion, for Native people and all people, humor is the WD-40 of healing. So I keep that in mind on days that there's bad news that come up, or some of the trials and tribulations of being Indigenous in Canada. Just the fact that how our sense of humor allows us to heal and survive.
Drew, you mentioned some of those stories, that you grew up with, and hearing some of the humorous side of things when it comes to Indigenous stories. Can you share one of those stories with us?
Oh, well, I mean, a lot of these stories are not just here; they're all across the country. Here's where I sort of learned about. Well, okay, sure. I mean,
Okay.
I learned about how to do comedy just from talking to people here. One of my favorite stories was when I went to India. I was in India touring across the country, actually going to a multicultural conference on humor in Kerala, India. And it was my mother's birthday here. I missed my mother's birthday. And I managed to find a cyber cafe where I could send her send my aunt an email, who works at the band office. And I sent her an email saying, "Hi, Auntie Julia. I'm having a great time here in India. It's fascinating. It's amazing. I'm walking down the streets here and I'm seeing like camels and elephants. It's really cool. I tell my mother I'll bring her something wonderful. I wish her a happy birthday for me." And then about 2 days later, I got an email back from my aunt saying, "Oh, your mother's glad you're having a good time." And she had a pretty good birthday. We went out to dinner, and then we went to the dump to watch the Bears.
Hey, you
So
know
just sort of
what?
a
I would,
different view of exoticism.
yeah, I would find that entertaining. I would find that entertaining. Listen, we've actually had quite a few storytellers on Daytime Ottawa over the years, and I'm talking recent years. Drew, do you think there's been a growth in storytelling in recent years? And if so, why do
It
you
was
think
a,
that is?
it was actually a shock to me when I discovered when I see, I always consider myself a writer because I write for television. I write novels, short stories. I write a lot of plays. I do documentaries. I wrote a graphic novel. I have articles and essays and magazines and newspapers, etc. I consider myself more of a writer who lectures. And then I remember just having a conversation with some people, and they just sort of said the way I lecture through stories. That I'm what I refer to as a contemporary storyteller, a person who
Right.
tells stories through all the different ways of telling stories. Because it used to be all oral, but in today's society, even video games have deep and detailed narratives woven into the story.
Yeah.
So I just like to consider myself somebody who tells interesting and funny and moving stories about life today in all the different forms that are available to tell stories, including just standing up in front of an audience and sharing some of my adventures in this bizarre world.
Well, I'm sure our audience watching right now is looking forward to it. Drew, thanks so much for joining us. A reminder that's happening Thursday, February the 24th, 7:30 p.m., Shankman Arts Center, and live streamed. You can go to ottawastorytellers.ca for more information. We'll be right back.